Hello there. Um, Good to see you again. It's 8th of July and it's Wednesday. And do you know how when you're going through a tough time, and usually happens over a short period of sustained kind of intensity, the adrenaline kicks in and you keep on going, and you're not really aware that you're keeping on going. But when everything's finished and you sit down and then you just kind of collapse into a heap, then you begin to be aware of what you've gone through. I think something like that is happening as lockdown begins to ease. Everyone's kind of teeth clenched, um, head down, get on with what has been, I think, more challenging than probably people would care to admit in this lockdown. I mean, I recognise some people like it. Some people are introverts. Other people, I think it's the proximity of the fact that things are beginning to ease that causes folks to actually maybe come closer to a recognition of how tough the last 3 months have been. So it's this last wee bit where people are kind of where things are changing, because it's not just stay in, go nowhere, do nothing, speak to no one. It's a kind of it's not no back to normality. It's somewhere in between. And it was a quote that had kind of had remembered it, forgotten it, and then was reminded of it. John Keegan was it's a busy field, and so there's lots of people who could probably claim this title. He died in 2012, but he was probably in the last 30 years Britain's premier military historian, and as such was just a world authority on things like World War One, World War Two. He was part of that kind of, was it really two wars or was it just one war with a slight truce in the middle? Um, he was just an authority on what happened in World War One and how it affected people. He was People were obviously quite surprised when you got to meet the man one to one, because while he was very conversant with horrific facts and things that were just horrendous, he himself was just a fairly quiet, mild, gentlemanly individual. Um, Deeply, well, his eulogy in the Daily Telegraph said he was deeply imbued with his Roman Catholic faith. He was quite a quiet person, but he was very, very clear about the reality of what had happened in World War One, and it was this one particular phrase that I remember, just as people were kind of suggesting things were getting tougher just now. Um, Again, it's a difficult thing to say, but for lots of people, the book entitled "The First World War" by John Keegan is probably still the defining single volume history that you need to read. And he describes the Somme in the following terms. He goes into a huge amount of detail practically as to how the battle was fought, but this is obviously a different description of the battle. This is the impact that it had. The Somme, together with the Battle of Ypres in July 1917, where 70,000 British soldiers were killed and 170,000 were wounded, marked the end of an age of vital optimism in British life that has never been recovered. Just reflect on that, if that's true or not. You'll often hear it said that the kind of philosophies and the lifestyles and some of the artwork and some just a whole different aspects of society just kind of 1880, 1890, philosophically, human beings were just getting better and better and better. And it couldn't get any better, basically. And humanity had just reached this level of achievement and intellectual standards. World War One, if ever an event, just destroyed and reached into the heart of the human soul and removed that apparent vanity that says we are so good at this modern world. World War One just destroyed that. The thing is, does it destroy it in the way that John Keegan says? Because he's saying something which I think is quite significant. He calls it vital optimism. The Somme, I mean World War One generally, but the Somme in particular, and the Battle of Ypres, again specifically, it removed a whole generation of men from Britain. It seemed to be a scar, and that idea of vital optimism being removed, a kind of melancholy realism. I'm concerned, I'm thinking, pondering, what is going to be the aftermath of lockdown? Are we going to get a vaccine and then, 5 years from now, everyone's going to forget about it? You remember lockdown haircuts? Oh, Trings, what a laugh. Is that going to be the extent of it? Or is it going to be something closer? I don't think it's going to be, certainly thus far, our experience has not been what John Keegan says of World War One, but it's that what he's saying is the loss of vital optimism. Different folks have interpreted different meanings from that, but I would just take the idea of hope. The idea that when you look forward, there is a positiveness about what you're seeing, envisaging, hoping for in the future. And it's just that sense that there is a fearfulness in folks now. Scotland is doing, well, certainly relative to England, is doing reasonably well. Obviously, things might change. There might be spikes, and various places may have to go into lockdown, as some of the places in England have been. But it's that basic point. I don't think Christians are supposed to live their life in fear. We, above all else, are supposed to be the people who have hope. And it was with that kind of thought, what's the long-term effect of this going to be? I was reading, this is a book. I mean, I don't have the book. I'm dipping in, as you can now with online resources. This is New Morning Mercies, and it's just got this. It was because I was thinking about this, the effect of what the virus has done to people's expectation of life in general and society. Are we in danger of losing hope? This is the quote. I don't know who wrote this, but I just think it's worthy of repeating. Hope is not a situation. Hope is not a location. Hope is not a possession. Hope is not an experience. Hope is more than an insight or a truism. Hope is a person. and his name is Jesus. I think one of the difficulties in terms of Christianity at this time is the fact that we know we're supposed to seize this opportunity. Christians down through the generations, times of pandemic, have been there to serve the body of Christ and proclaim the gospel and do outreach into the community and help those. And society's in a different position. It's, the council's doing what the church used to do, hundreds of years ago. We aren't in quite the same place. Plus, the virus itself is meaning we're not supposed to have contact with folks. That's the loving thing to do. The point, however, is this impetus to be people of hope when other people are losing theirs, that can put a pressure on you. It's just, we need to be able to share that with people. We need to be able to bring that to other folks. And as we're beginning to open up, and as people, I think, are actually feeling more frightened, not less, I think hope has to be an absolute essential. And it was just the way in which Christians, no matter what we're up against, sometimes at complete variance with the facts round about us, are supposed to advocate that there is always hope. And I think that's because Christ has promised to always be with us and never leave us, never forsake us. And if that tentativeness and that fearfulness is yours this morning, if there's a certain trepidation, recognize we have what has to be the determining, defining pivot point of experience. We have a relationship with Jesus that means we have hope. Might not always be able to articulate it, but we must always seek to have what Keegan refers to as that vital optimism. We need to have it, and we get it from Christ, and we need to share it. Because I think there are lots and lots of people who are quite fearful and quite lonely and quite scared. And where that kind of fear exists, that vital optimism, that Christ-centered hope, it will be very necessary in the months and years ahead. Meantime, go with God, because I know God goes with you. Bye-bye.